On Christmas Eve, 1971, a teenage girl boarded a plane over Peru with her mother. Just a few hours later, she would be falling alone from the sky into one of the most dangerous jungles on Earth. The flight had entered a violent storm. Dark clouds surrounded the aircraft. Rain hammered the windows. Then, in an instant, lightning struck. What happened next would become one of the most unbelievable survival stories ever recorded.
17-year-old Juliane Koepcke was still strapped to her row of seats when the plane broke apart. She was thrown into open air, falling nearly 2 miles above the Amazon rainforest. No parachute, no control. Only storm clouds, spinning debris, and the endless jungle below.
Juliane was born in Peru to German parents who were both zoologists. She had grown up surrounded by nature, science, and the harsh realities of the rainforest. That Christmas, she and her mother, Maria, were flying to reunite with Juliane's father. It was supposed to be a holiday journey, a simple family trip. Nothing about that day suggested disaster. But the weather was growing worse. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over the jungle. Inside the cabin, passengers began to feel the aircraft shake. Juliane looked out into the darkness as the plane pushed deeper into turbulence. The mood was shifting. Something was wrong. The shaking became violent. Luggage rattled. Passengers cried out. The cabin was no longer calm. It was panic. Juliane later remembered hearing her mother's final words. "This is the end. It's all over." Moments later, the aircraft began to tear apart. Lansa Flight 508 disintegrated in midair. Parts of the plane were ripped away by the storm. Seats, debris, and passengers were hurled into the sky. Juliane was still strapped into her seat row when she was thrown out of the broken aircraft. She was no longer inside a plane. She was falling through the storm itself. The world spun around her. Wind roared in her ears. Clouds swallowed everything. Below her stretched the vast Amazon rainforest. No one could survive a fall like that. And yet, somehow, Juliane did. When she woke up, Juliane was lying on the jungle floor. She was badly injured, but alive. Her collarbone was broken. Her body was bruised and torn by the fall. One of her eyes was swollen shut. One sandal was missing. Around her were branches, wreckage, and silence. She was alone, completely alone. The crash had happened deep inside the Peruvian Amazon, far from towns, roads, or quick rescue. The jungle around her was immense, dense, wet, alive with danger. At 17 years old, injured and shocked, Juliane had to face a terrifying possibility. No one was coming soon. Juliane remembered something important from her parents' work in the rainforest. If you find water, follow it. A small stream can lead to a larger stream. A larger stream can lead to people. So she began to walk. Weak, injured, and exhausted, she followed the water through the jungle. It was not a plan for comfort. It was a plan for survival. The jungle was relentless. Insects swarmed her. Heat and humidity drained her strength. Every step was painful. She had almost no food, almost no protection, and almost no idea how far she would need to go. But she kept moving, because stopping in that jungle could mean disappearing forever. At night, the rainforest became even more frightening. The darkness was thick. The sounds were unfamiliar. Every movement in the leaves could be a threat. Juliane slept on the ground alone, surrounded by the wild. She was grieving, injured and terrified. But somehow, each morning, she stood up again and kept walking. Day after day, she followed the water, through mud, through tangled roots, through exhaustion and pain. Her body was weakening, but her mind stayed fixed on one thing: keep going downstream. Keep going until the jungle changes. Keep going until there is some sign of people. Then, after days alone in the wilderness, Juliane found something extraordinary. A small boat and a rough shelter near the river. It was the first sign of human life she had seen since the crash. For the first time, hope became real. Not rescue yet, but proof that she was no longer lost beyond all reach. Now all she could do was wait. Weak and barely able to continue, Juliane stayed near the shelter and hoped someone would return. After everything she had endured, the storm, the fall, the jungle, the loneliness, it came down to one final question: would anyone find her in time? They did. Local men eventually arrived at the shelter and found her there. Incredibly, this injured teenage girl standing before them was a survivor of the plane crash. After more than a week alone in the Amazon, Juliane had made it to the edge of rescue. She had done the impossible, and now, finally, she was no longer alone. They took her by boat toward safety. After days of jungle sounds, pain, and fear, the river now carried her toward life. Not because the danger had never come, but because she had endured it. One step, one stream, one day at a time. In the hospital, the scale of her survival became clear. Out of the many people on board Flight 508, Juliane Koepcke was the only known survivor. She had fallen from the sky into the Amazon rainforest and lived. It was the kind of story that sounds impossible until you realize it happened. But survival did not mean the end of pain. Juliane later learned that her mother had not survived. The miracle of her own rescue was tied forever to devastating loss. That is often the truth inside survival stories. They are not only about endurance, they are also about grief, about what remains after the impossible has already happened. Juliane went on to rebuild her life. She became a biologist, following the scientific path that had shaped her childhood. In time, she even returned to the rainforest and to the story that had once nearly ended her life. She did not become famous because she sought attention. She became unforgettable because her survival revealed something extraordinary about the human spirit. That even in chaos, even in pain, even in total isolation, a person can keep going. Some stories feel too unbelievable to be true. A girl falling from a plane, A jungle swallowing the wreckage, a lone survivor walking out alive. But Juliane Koepcke's story is real, and maybe that is why it stays with us, because it reminds us that survival is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is one wounded person taking one more step, and then another, and another, until life returns. Juliane Koepcke did not just survive the fall. She survived everything that came after it.
This is PaperWitness, where real stories are drawn, remembered, and brought to life.
If you enjoy real stories like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.